This week is Parshat Ekev, but there is no Zohar, and so there's a subject in Parshat Ekev which I think is very important. And although it's a little technical, but I don't think that should prevent us from understanding the significance of what brachot mean, the blessings. The word blessing should become an important segment of all religions, blessings. And yet, as we will shortly understand from the Zohar, that the idea of blessings is not what it was intended to mean. And as the Zohar consistently says, if we don't understand the meaning, and if we don't understand what we're doing with the Hebrew language, because that is the system, and it's like using the computer, just pressing the buttons, and things come out on the screen. But that doesn't mean you're using the computer just because things appeared on the screen. Same thing when it comes to brachot. We're under the impression that as long as I have made a bracha, let's say before partaking of food, or in the prayers, there are brachot. So once I made the brachot, I've connected to whatever reason I think I'm making the bracha. So we'll begin with the first section here in Parshat Ekev. First, to make the connection, I'll read the Aramaic. Vaya Ekev tishmi'un et hamishpatim ha'ela. This is what the first verse in chapter 6, verse 14. And then he brings the second verse, V'achalta v'shavata v'rachta et Hashem Elokecha. Also, towards the end of this chapter, discussing that one partakes of a meal, he should eat, be satiated, and then to bless. Says the Zohar, this precept, this mitzvah of blessing to the Creator, to the Lord. It does not say to bless the Creator. Al kol ma'da achal v'shati, on everything that we eat and we drink, v'thaneh b'hayalma, and that we enjoy in this world. V'lo barich, and if he does not bless, ikra gazlin l'gabei kutsha brichu. Once he does not bless the Creator, we'll go along with that meaning. Meanwhile, he is then considered to be a robber. Iktir gozel aviv v'imo, and Zohar brings a verse from Mishle, which says that one is the equivalent of robbing one's father and mother. I mean, as if there's a special requirement. I mean, in the 10 Commandments we have, thou shalt not steal. So, what is so special about stealing from your father and mother? Some of us would become very upset if we can see somebody stealing from their own mother and father. How could you steal from your own mother and father? As if, when you steal from others, it should not be as severe. And what is the difference? You're not allowed to steal, you're not allowed to steal. But how could you steal from your own mother and father? For all they've done for you, etc. When you steal from a stranger, hasn't done anything for you, so then we understand. I mean, this is the normal consciousness, unfortunately. This is the way we think. But the Zohar is going to explain it in another light. V'ha ukmua chavraya, and the companions already have established what this meant. Begin the bochin, the baruch ba'nash l'kudsha ba'reichu, atil amshecha hayin korei d'chayei l'shmei d'kudsha ba'reichu. That when a blessing is recited, then we are drawing life. The purpose of the bracha immediately is stated in the Zohar, that when we bless a person blesses the Lord, he then draws from the wellspring of life. Ularka alei mahu me'ahu mishtei ilai vata litmashcha mitzamen l'kol alma. Not only does he draw to himself, but he draws to the whole world. Right. Now, this is the Zohar itself and the translation. Here, Rabbi Ashlag, as in several other difficult sections of the Zohar, has an additional commentary which he named Marot HaSulam. Ordinarily, it was referred to as the Sulam, as the ladder. This is Marot HaSulam. Marot means to light up. Could mean lighting up the ladder, or simply stated, it is an expanded version of the ladder, meaning his interpretation of the Zohar. Bir Hamayna. This is the explanation of this discourse. Kol hana'a sha'adam neneh mi'akadosh baruch hu, all pleasures that a person derives from the Lord, im mevarech aleh, hu mala ota hana'a im kavanot habrachot lebchinat man ela malchut. That when a person enjoys something that the Creator has created for our benefit, when he blesses upon this particular pleasure, what the bracha is accomplishing is humale ota hana'a in kavanat bracha lebchinat man ela malchut. In other words, the blessing is not merely a blessing that we understand to the Creator, but rather this pleasure, mind you, it's not the pleasure that he has partaken, because the blessing is recited before. But when he recites this with this im kavanot habracha, incidentally, it is not sufficient that the blessing had been recited, but with the kavanah, with the direction that this bracha must contain, it is then an action that is referred to as pchinat man, mayin nukvin. Mayin nukvin, mayin in Aramaic means waters, nukvin means female waters. There are two aspects of energy that exist in the world. No more, no less. Just two forms of energy. All of these four different forms of energies then assume other characteristics. But essentially, any form of energy, whether it be in the form of petroleum, electricity, energy of a person, however and whichever form this energy takes its form, it either will be in the category of Bchinat Mayim Nukvin, meaning that originates from activity here on this plane, this terrestrial level, where we are. In other words, this Mayim Nukvin is energy that has been initiated by people, animals, trees, whatever, but originates here in the world of Malchut Nukvin. Mayim Duchrin is like rain. The water or blessing or beneficence, when it emerges from the upper realm, it's called Mayim Duchrin, male waters, meaning that it did not originate on our realm. A well from whence water emerges is called Mayim Nukvin, female waters. Why? As opposed to rainwater. Rainwater originates above, and therefore it is referred to as male waters, and the well will be referred to as Mayim Nukvin, female waters. Female meaning this realm that we exist. Why are they referred to as male or female? Because observing what male and female means, that one is channeling. Therefore, it is not an effect. It is from the source, because even well water originates from above, meaning it originates assumingly from the Creator. So the rain takes the form of energy. It is energy. Rain is energy. And it does many things, rain. Besides provide us with drinking water, it cleanses the air, cleanses the ground, cleanses the atmosphere here at our level, etc. So it's an energy. We call it a male energy. A male energy because it does not have the participation of anything that exists, that is part of creation. Female waters originate through the process of, let's say, well water, which has gone into the ground and now emerges upwards. It has already been enclosed. It's been bathed within this atmosphere. It has been clothed within the confines of Earth. Earth is female because Earth it draws to itself, and therefore Earth is considered to be an energy force, gravitation, which is an energy, another form of energy, but that originates not from above, not directly, but rather indirectly. It is because of the energy that first originated above. Ultimately, it is like male and female. The female produces a child. She becomes pregnant, produces a child. The male is a channel for the light force of God. The female processes the child. In other words, the process evolves from an action relating to this world, whereas Mayim Duchrin, or male waters, have not undergone a process. It has not undergone a process. When I say it hasn't undergone a process, whenever man becomes involved, whether he takes lumber, cuts a tree, that tree did not originate with man. He may have planted the seed. Again, the seed is not something that man created. And when he cuts that tree down, he then puts the tree through a process. Whatever is involved in the process which relates to this world, that is referred to as energy of a female character, meaning it has undergone the influence, it has undergone the participation of ourselves. We are the results of the Creator, land, earth, and everything else that's contained in this world. Okay? So what happens is that when this pleasure connected with the kavanot, meaning meditation of the bracha, we convert this energy, this pleasure. Someone takes a food, has pleasure. Where did that pleasure come from? Needless to say, not many of us give it any thought. We say the pleasure comes from the meat. Let's say someone enjoys a steak. Then, where is this pleasure? Where does this pleasure stem from? Now listen, this cup of tea is rather very simple because it's water, again originating from above, but the fact that it is undergoing a process. It is contained within a cup, and this water, even if it undergoes a purification process, the water has not changed. Maybe the taste, etc. But when we recite this bracha, this blessing, what we are doing is now converting this energy, because this pleasure, as in the meat is only a vehicle which channels the meat itself. Any aspect of physicality has absolutely no beneficence of itself, and all that physicality represents in this world is the opportunity by which raw, naked mayim duchrin, the energy of the Creator, which means beneficence, is converted. Energy is converted into fuel, into petroleum. Petroleum by and within itself is not an energy force as in relative to the internal force of itself. What petroleum does, or what this table does, or what this cup does, takes this beneficence, which is of a metaphysical nature, and converts it into a useful purpose. I say useful, meaning the beneficence of God cannot be eaten this way. Although at one time, before the sin of Adam, we have to understand, according to the Zohar, that Adam did not need the physical elements to convert the beneficence, the pleasure of God, by virtue of an apple or a pear. All he would do was look at the pear and connect without even participating, without partaking of the apple, let's say. He could look at the apple and draw the sustenance. To taste the apple, although sometimes we even experience tasting the apple without tasting the apple, just by looking at the apple and your mouth begins to saliva. What does that mean? Again, while that might indicate being removed from the intermediary of the physicality of the apple, you see, I'm enjoying the apple without eating the apple. So would that necessarily mean I'm connecting to the beneficence of the light force of God. This mayan duchrin, male waters, meaning it stems and has not been polluted, it has not been altered, and tapping that energy directly from the Creator. The answer is no. The taste buds, because of consciousness, just observing the apple, the body will undergo a process. That energy is converted. That energy already has been converted. It's not similar to Adam, where the saliva didn't have to run down, his mouth didn't become watery, but rather he was able to tap directly because he was above the limitations and was not limited and was not governed by the physical aspects. And being governed after the sin, therefore it now necessitated him eating the apple. Whereas before, all he did was look at the apple, huh? And I just want to make the point that even when you look at the apple, and you begin to feel as if you're tasting that apple, that also should be understood as mayan nukvid, because the energy that this apple contains, this energy that is now being converted to as a form of pleasure, already has undergone a physical process. It may even be a consciousness process, but it's still undergoing a process that originates with man, that originates at this level, and therefore it is not to be considered as mayan duchrin, even though we don't eat it. So what happens here? That with the blessing, says Rabbi Ashla, we convert that energy into a pchinat man, ela malchut. This is the procedure by which this very involved procedure, through the efforts of the bracha and kavanot of the bracha, we convert that energy, because we cannot maintain a pleasure. Unfortunately, we know that to be true. The second bite never tastes as good as the first bite. Why? Why does it disappear? On the contrary. Well, because you're becoming satiated. So what? If you're not satiated, well, you're not as hungry for it. Does it have to necessarily involve being hungry? And now after the first bite, you now do not feel the necessity of the second bite. That is not a reduction in the energy, because if you, whenever you take of the energy of the life force of God, the second bite is in no way diminished, because there is no reduction, there is no movement, there is no change in the light force of God. And yet we know that it does diminish. The expectation of the food is more satiating than even the first bite. The expectation of preparing oneself for the food. But the reason why we seem to have this relative experience with food of it being diminished is only because we have not created a process by which the light force, or the pleasure of the light force of God, remains constant, as the light force itself is constant, does not undergo changes. The changes that take place is in the physical realm, or in the realm of nukva, in the realm of the effect. The same as we understand when you boil water. The physicality of the water may have undergone changes, but the internal the internal nature of water, meaning the atoms. They have not undergone any change. Yeah, they may move from this place, and may now take the form of condensation, but the changes from water to condensation does not take place in the internal, into the internal character or the fuel of water, which again is mayan duchrin. Coming from above, it remains mayan duchrin. That water undergoes changes from water to being condensation does not necessarily affect, it does not affect the internal nature of the mayan duchrin. So here, he says we have to convert the process of the bracha is to convert and return. In fact, if we study Kabbalah, then which only today is substantiated by 20th century science, is that as before we even go through the process of making the bracha, etc., 99% of partaking of this cup of tea takes place before it takes place. Because the water there is to provide pleasure, that's its internal characteristic. That's why it's called chesed. It wants to share, wants to extend out. Its internal nature is not to withhold for itself. Its internal character of the life force of God, the hana'ah, the beneficence, the pleasure of God, but rather it is to share. So the moment that where does it originate? Does it originate with my thoughts that I want a cup of tea? And so the water, wherever it is, wherever that water is, coming through the tap, that water that ultimately I will drink, that aspect of that water, the consciousness of the water, is already on its way, and maybe it's not even only on its way, but that I have already at a 99% level have enjoyed the water. What is missing is that 1%. The 1%. And from that originates this idea of the mouth being watery. Why does the mouth water? I mean, what's the process that's going on? What I just stated. Because the moment you look at what you're going to eat, if it's an apple and you love apples and your mouth begins to become watery, then what in effect is happening is that 99%, 99 and 9/10% of that apple has already been consumed. And therefore, when you actually take the bite, it's diminished. Why is it diminished? Because already you've eaten the apple. Consciously, you've already eaten the apple. This is the way the process goes. And this is supported in science without going into a lengthy discussion on how this is possible and why it's possible, etc. But that's the way it happens. Therefore, before it becomes manifest, although I've already desired the water and I've received the water, I don't have to make a blessing. Although I'm thinking now I'd like to have a bottle of mineral water, and I'd have to first go out and purchase that bottle, etc. And yet, on the 99% level, I've already tasted the water. That bottle that I will choose in the supermarket, that bottle has already been transferred. The energy of that bottle in advance had already been transferred to me. But I don't have to make a blessing until that water is in front of my eyes. And we'll understand. But the points I'm raising now is that while we are so robotic that processes take the preference of our minds, meaning that we do not delve deeper into what is taking place. The one who does that is only the physicist. The average layman does not participate in a physicist's pleasure of arriving as to how the process operates. But what I just stated, as far as our subject is concerned, all of this has taken place before. And therefore, now that it's in front of me, and that I can go on for hours explaining why do I make the blessing on the water, on this cup of tea, where the cup of tea is in front of me, when in essence, this cup of tea already was there long before it was created at this 1% level. So the moment I say I'd like a cup of tea, I should make the blessing. And the halakha, but the halakha is so beautiful because it provides us with an understanding of the process. It's not just, this is the law, this is the rule, and follow it. On the contrary, I only say it's always so unfortunate that when I studied in the yeshiva, had I known Kabbalah at that time, how you begin to understand that halakha is no longer a dogmatic approach of religion, but on the contrary, to teach you the movement of the universe, how things move, how things are created, how things evolve, etc. So I must have this cup of tea in front of me before I make this blessing. Well, for an obvious reason, because what happens if the cup of tea that I want, I change my mind. When the tea finally comes, how many times have I asked for a cup of tea and I never get to drink it? It happened to all of us. Now, the fact that cup of tea lies in front of me, I haven't created a setting by which this water, or the pleasure of the Creator, the pleasure that one derives from drinking water, whether it be for health purposes or many other reasons, but I may never drink that cup of water. I may draw it to myself, but I may never drink it. Therefore, the water has not undergone the process. If it doesn't undergo the process, then essentially what happens is that it remains in what we call an animated state of suspension. It's waiting. Well, won't this water be just thrown away? Well, that's why I don't permit them to take the cup of tea away, even though I didn't finish it. I have to finish it. Because, not that, as we will learn, I created a process, and then it's gone to waste. I've established the beneficence of the light force of God. I've converted through the process, just like this processed cheese. There's a process of taking wool from an animal, processing it into creating a garment. But if you took that wool and then just discarded it, it would be taking energy, potential energy, and discarding it. And therefore, waste is, as we will learn from this Zohar, we are then considered thieves. Why thieves? Just say we're abusers. Why does the Zohar use the word thieves? But we'll understand that soon. In any event, this is the process of turning and converting this internal energy called the light force of God, which becomes manifest in many, many ways, so as to undergo the process. And we're referring to, as you said before, that kind of light beneficence of the light force of God, which refers to eating and drinking. There are many other blessings. There are blessings in the Amidah, in the Tefillot. There are many prayers that are recited. Each one involves converting through a process the light force of God. It must undergo a process. We cannot we cannot enjoy, just like we cannot enjoy electrical current directly. Can't touch it. It must undergo a process called a bulb. And ultimately, through the intermediary of the bulb, the light force of God is revealed as light. This is the closest that we can get to light. Alright? So it must undergo a process. That process is called man, and that process goes back to the last level of its non-material or metaphysical level, known as Malchut. All this incidentally takes place beyond our concept of time, space, and motion. Although today, and only today, are we fortunate enough to understand that time is no longer what we once thought it was meant to be. It's instantaneous. So while this process seems to be a stretched out process, what happens is that when we convert the energy, the beneficence, hana'ah, which means the beneficence of the light force of God, we have to convert that, and we do convert that, back to now known as, by its code name, Mayin Nukvin, female waters. This is the only way how we can maintain and, more importantly, retain that energy. In other words, I drink a cup of water. I've done the procedure. What happens is that the internal nature, the substance, the 99% of this water will be maintained by the body. And so when science, medical researchers discuss the degeneration of the body, as we learn in this Parsha, so clearly, when it says, not by, ki lo ala lechem levado yecheh adam, ki al kol motzi fi Hashem yecheh adam. The reason, and this is going to change. It's going to change because of what we're going to learn this morning. The degeneration process of the physical body, which degenerates. So it's all, once you pass the age of 20, you're on your way downhill. Why are we on our way downhill, where the body ultimately will die after 190 years, but will die? Why will the body die? That we expect chiyat hametim. Because we have not furnished the body with the light force of God. Because not on the bread alone, even if we make the bracha, and we think as those people who still make brachot, still make blessings on the water, still make blessings, right? What they're doing, or what they're not accomplishing, I should say, is retaining the light force of God. That this body should live forever, like it lived during the time of Adam. He lived 930 years. Should have lived 1,000. He gave 70 years to David. Okay? Lived 930 years. Prior generations lived longer, until about 100 years ago, the process went down to its lowest age level of 47 for male. Now we're up to 78. Why? Because of medical advancements? Forget that. They didn't contribute no way to this curve reverting upwards. Had nothing to do with it. Because of since the Ari's time, things are changing. The process that creates aging is gradually being diminished. Now we're going to make a big push by understanding which the verse referred to, Al kol motzi fi Hashem yechyeh adam. The only thing that sustains the body is the internal beneficence, the internal nature of the light force of God. Unfortunately, I use the word unfortunately. I mean, if that was enough, we wouldn't need extra bathrooms. You can have an extra room in your home instead of a bathroom. But this is necessary. Only because we are subject to this physical process. But by its very nature, if we went through this process, it would not be necessary. There could be longer life. Why would there be longer life? Because when I drink this cup of tea, and which contains mayim duchrin, because it came through it will refer to water. The same applies to clothing. In this week's Parshat, it's not coincidental that all of a sudden the idea of clothing never wearing out. That's what the 40 years God says, and look how good I was to you. You wore clothing and it never wore out. It was just as if you would purchase this suit of clothes and it retained all of its nature and flavor, etc. Because in this week's Parsha, we are discussing how we can maintain the light force of God within us. If it does not undergo the process, then it's like water. You cook water, you want a hot cup of tea, you forgot, and what happened? The water disappeared. What disappeared? The atoms of the water disappeared now. Even the water didn't so much disappear because we'll notice condensation. So now it took upon itself a smaller version of the water. It's still water. But it no longer achieves the purpose of what God intended with this water. His purpose was to share His beneficence. And since it did not undergo the process so that man can retain it, but even if it did not cook out, we take this and we do not understand the process of why this is so essential, and we should finish it, even if we don't. It's a very lengthy one, but I'll try to continue to go through every step of this, so essential, because this is going to be another step in Tchiyat HaMeitim. In not only Tchiyat HaMeitim, but on how we do not have to undergo this aging process. The reason is simply stated again, because we are not feeding ourselves. We partake, we absorb the beneficence of God, but it doesn't stay with us. The reason there is degeneration of the body is the body is lacking food. It lacks food. What's food? Food means one word: light force of God. Light force of God. Hana'ah is called hana'ah, pleasure. Well, some people live to eat. Some people eat to live. So we're not talking about those people who live to eat. We're talking about those of us who eat so that we can survive, so that our bodies can become nourished. But unfortunately, our bodies do not receive the nourishment that originally God intended. Therefore, it meant that, therefore the verse is very clear. God does not want us to die. There should be longer life. There should be eternal life. But we don't maintain the body. Because if it doesn't undergo this process, as we learned here in this Marot Asulam of Rabbi Ashlag, we do not learn how to maintain and retain this pleasure. We know that after the first bite it disappears, second bite is lesser. This process also is referred to as a degenerative process. It's the same process. The reason that the second bite is not enjoyable as the first is because we haven't retained any of the. In fact, the second bite should be the same as the first bite, as I mentioned before. energy of the subject that is being eaten does not change. What is happening is abuse is taking over. We're not maintaining that hana'ah. There's a word, it's a code name, pleasure. It doesn't mean pleasure. Yes, you know whose pleasure it is? Pleasure of God. Because God created the beneficence, His beneficence, so to nourish us. And the pleasure is whose? His or ours? His, primarily. He enjoys when His subjects can participate, partake of His sharing. As we learn in the first rule in Kabbalah, the reason we are here is not so we can make brachot to God and say thank you. The reason the fruit is there, so that the sharing of God becomes manifested, so that He can enjoy His sharing. So the hana'ah refers to God. Alright, so it goes through a process. We have to know this process. At least once inserted into our mental computer, so while we may not always remember, but now, with the bracha at least, even if you don't remember the entire process that we will be studying here, nevertheless, what is the objective of this process? Just to go through an exercise? Keep busy in the service of God? As mistakenly we have assumed are these matters of blessings, but rather, how do you maintain any pleasure? How do you maintain air? Air contains energy. It's another manifestation of the light force of God. How do you maintain that? How do you absorb that? Unfortunately, what happens? It's just like we said, the physicality of the apple, the bread, the meat. We need a bathroom. We also suffer because we do not maintain and make manifest the internal energy of the light force of God in air. If we knew how to do that, as we are learning now, then you realize there will be no such thing referred to as friction. What is friction? What is friction? If I want to travel from here to New York, how long should it take me? How long should it take me? Immediately in your minds, what went through was the process of a plane, a car, a fighter, plane which travels, let's say, or a Concorder which travels twice the speed of sound, 3 times the speed of sound. This is the way we'll get there. But did you ever think about walking to New York in 2 minutes or 20 minutes? No, it doesn't even enter your mind. Why doesn't it? Doesn't the astronaut up there do it? How long does it take him to travel around the earth? Not travel from California to New York, but to travel from California east and coming back from the west. How long does it take him? Less than an hour. He walks. Why don't we do it? You know why we don't do it? Because the air has also, without going into the full detail of it, it's not that simple, but again, it has also its process. Air is an energy. We need air. Why do we need air? Why do we breathe air? The reason we breathe air, because this is another process by which this body requires another dimension of the hana'ah of the light force of God. Food and drink. Food and drink. Food is represented by the left column, and water by the right column, and of course what is air? The central column. These 3 components is energy. Same way as in the atom. Everything that's real energy of a bulb. You have two poles and you have a filament. Everything is within that dimension of called energy. So too now we have three separate categories called food, and drink. That's why we don't eat on Yom Kippur. Everything becomes so beautifully. It's no longer a dogma. No longer a dogma. Don't eat. You're not permitted to drink. That's the halacha on Yom Kippur. On the contrary. Because we have to achieve the level of Binah, whatever that means, on Yom Kippur. So we eliminate that physical process. That's all it means. So we need these three aspects. Now the reason that we can't walk from California to New York in a matter of a few moments, is because there is this physical aspect that must be converted. It's a process that is required because of bread of shame. Well, should we make a blessing on breathing air? We'll leave that for a moment. Same thing. Why don't we make a blessing on it? We'll leave that. I hope I make, it's becoming clear that to maintain that hana'ah, unfortunately, is not through the procedure of taking the cup of tea and drinking it. While that contains the light force of God, not the water. The water is merely a channel, it's a carrier by which the light force of God becomes manifest. And the more we understand the process, the more this physical body becomes nourished. Then there is no reason for it to undergo a degenerative process. No reason. In fact, that's the way it's going to end. We're all going to become knowledgeable on how we don't get older. In fact, science already knows exactly. It's an amazing process, the aging process. It shows you how it goes to the left instead of to the right. So beautiful. Talk about the physical structure of the body, of the molecules, the way they turn. As you get older, they turn towards the left. When you're younger, they're facing the right. It blew my mind when, getting into this subject, because we do want to, according to Avram Azolai, it now depends on us, on how quickly this information becomes not only widespread in the world, but how each of us particularly absorb this knowledge into our daily activities. And so, it's not only going to be the creams. Unfortunately, the creams, doesn't delay the aging process. Makes us, on the surface it appears, but the degenerative process continues. And it doesn't. The only reason why there is such a concept referred to as a degenerative process is because we are not maintaining fi Hashem yichya. We are not maintaining that internal beneficence of the light force of God. It's dissipated like water that's been overcooked and just dissipates. And so what happened with the light force of God in that water? No use. It just is an animated suspension, ultimately to be used. Okay? Umekablim sham mochin ukelim. Don't you see what happens? The light force of God. Let's say we'll talk about an apple. When the light force of God is contained in that apple, says Rabbi Ashla, all gleaning this from the Zohar, why don't we retain the light force of God when I drink a cup of tea? The reason being, because these physical components, skin, the apple, the seeds, all that went into the makings of an apple. The light force of God has not become enclosed as an entity. It's pure, raw, naked energy. As pure, raw, naked energy, this body as we know it, cannot nourish from that energy. Just like we can't nourish from raw, naked energy. Got to be harnessed. We just can't connect directly. Got to undergo a process. So too, the finished product is not the apple, says Rabbi Ashlag. Not the apple. Eating the apple does not, or the apple itself does not contain the channeling or the vessel that can contain, another word for harnessing, contain the light force and beneficence of God. It is only a procedure by which I initiate, but then the creation of a vessel, just like this cup, was created so that we can understand that to have a cup of tea, you must to harness this water, which is in abundance, but for it to be useful and serve a useful purpose for me, it requires a cup, it requires a vessel. Oh, not how am I going to drink water? Yes, it's true. A Kabbalist doesn't need this. Doesn't need a cup. Go look at the rain. Like Adam before, he could look at the rain and go through the whole procedure that we're going to learn. But we're not accustomed to that. We need first the consciousness and understanding that to contain energy requires a vessel, a motor to put to use. Petroleum requires a motor, undergoes a process, and then the inertia, the movement to move that car takes place. What's moving the car? The life force of God is moving the car. But this is the way the process operates in order for the wheels to begin moving. All right? On this level, this is how we begin to accustom ourselves to an idea that the light force of God also must consist of light and vessel. It must be a vessel. Where's the vessel? Is this the vessel? No. Is the water the vessel? No. That's his revelation. Therefore, when we drink the water and we have not understood the process, because knowing is the connection, knowing is the creation of the vessel, you drank water and you haven't nourished this body. You haven't nourished this body. Does that mean everybody who drinks 8 glasses of water, we're told drink 8 glasses of water, does that mean you never get sick anymore, Hashem? Is that a guarantee? That the body now? Of course, that has nothing to do with it. How much do you have to drink? You drink a drop of water, because a drop of water contains the light force of God. How big is the light force of God? This big, or bigger? How big is it? It's infinite. It's not measured in quantity. We're discussing quality. To retain the light force of God, it must undergo this process. And this process is that once you've made the blessing, and you created a Pchinat Man, which means also restriction, and this must go back to Malchut, our equivalency, vessel. Must go up to Bina. These are terms, code names, which I assume you should know. And over there, does the Hana'ah, which is another code name of the beneficence of the light force of God, achieve its moach, which means literally brain, and the vessel. Meaning, moach again, this would take, I discuss it actually in one of my books, what is the brain? Science, you realize, after trillions of dollars spent on what the brain is, what the mind is, you know that they still don't understand the first step in this understanding. The first step. What is the mind? What is the brain? You got a mind, you got a brain. Okay, the brain is that physical brain. They call that the brain. What's the mind? Etc. Mohin is the channeling, you have the life force of God. It's nothing of a physical nature, completely metaphysical. When I say metaphysical, consciousness is not metaphysical. Only one aspect. There's only the life force of God and us. Everything that we understand, although it may assume a metaphysical nature, does not mean it's metaphysical. The mind, thinking, thought process, all of these things are not metaphysical. Well, are they? They're not physical. A thought, is it physical? Yes. If relative to what? Yeah, relative to the table, thought is what? Metaphysical. Does that mean, therefore, that thought is metaphysical because relative to the table? What did Einstein establish with relativity? Means nothing. It's open to any interpretation. Relative to what? Now, the mind, thought, relative to the life force of God is physical. We learn that through cause and effect. In the Talmud Esser Sfirot, we learn that in the world of pure metaphysics, you have vessel, and you have cause, and then you have an effect. Does the cause always mean thought? Always mean the aspect of relative to the effect? It's metaphysical. No, it's just a completely wrong description of what metaphysical means. Metaphysical is the life force of God. It is in no way, unlike thought. Do I have the same thoughts as you? If thought was purely metaphysical, then how come I think different things than you? What created my thought and what created your thought? A vessel. Or why are we thinking differently from each other? There is an influence taking place on the essential ingredient, the essential fuel of everything, which is the life force of God. I should have the same thoughts as you. But, because it undergoes a process, the process is what makes the appearance of the life force of God taking on different characters and different natures. But it doesn't. The life force of God remains pure, unadulterated, and therefore it is completely in unity. It is only when it goes through processes of metaphysical natures, still, those what we refer to as metaphysical natures are not. I don't know if I've made myself clear. But in any event, through this process, it receives this mohin. Mohin, meaning a cable for the beneficence of the life force of God. It must have similar characteristics. Water and oil don't mix. Well, how can you mix water and oil? Can you ever mix water and oil? Of course. Cook water and oil together. Heat oil. We can do things in the process. There must always be intermediate. How do you take a purely non-physical, but totally non-physical entity known as the light force of God, and now bring that and connect that to this atmosphere, to this body, to anything that exists in this world? It requires mochen. It is very similar. It is similar meaning it is devoid of any physical aspects as we understand it. And then, of course, the vessel. Malchut. A malchut. A vessel. Now, for those who have learned Talmud Esesphere, feel more comfortable with what I'm saying. But in any event, if you could just remember, the light force of God must be placed, just like the light force of God is placed into petroleum, and therefore now you can use that as a fuel for an automobile. Remember, if you can't adjust your mind to that, then you have a serious problem in achieving a broader consciousness. Fuel, electricity, food, paper, all of these aspects that we use in one way or another as fuel. Paper is used as a fuel to present ideas. We print on the paper. Now, paper fuels an idea. Everything of a physical nature is merely a step by which the light force of God, that's all there is nothing more than the light force of God. Everything else is the process. Everything else is the mishmash. Why do I call it mishmash? Because it takes on different characteristics. The light force of God does not undergo any changes, just it now becomes manifested, whether it be manifestation within a fruit or a table or water, whatever it might be. But before it assumes any form of physicality as we know it in this world, it also undergoes a process of mochin and kelim. Shemehem yored hashefel kol ha'olamot. This is the only way by which this light force, beneficence of the light force of God, can become connected, can relate, can influence, can have an effect on this world. Without this process, then the world is short of its sustenance in every which way. Not only for the body that degenerates, but mankind degenerates. Thoughts degenerate. As we have seen in this process, everything degenerates. The thoughts of where people are today, where it was 500 years ago, is different. ובשביל זה mahane hakadosh baruch hu et adam. And only through this process can we say that God provides pleasure to the individual. Therefore, God, where are you when I need you? He says, I'm waiting. Just create a setting by which, just like you have drawn petroleum out of the earth so that it can fuel an automobile. But if you don't have a process called the motor in the automobile and you just fill up the automobile and you forgot to put the motor in and say, now why doesn't it go? You don't ask those questions. This is what Rabbi Ashlag is trying to tell us. That without this process, don't say, God, where are you? He says, here it is, right in front of you. There's all the beneficence you need for anything. It's all there. But it requires a process. V'nimsa, she'im adam nenevelo berach, if a person now drinks the water, and he did not make the blessing, meaning the blessing, which is a stimulation because of the word structure, because of the letters, the power of the letters. Therefore, if you say the blessing in English, it was worth less. The Hebrew letters, the configuration of the Hebrew letters into words, they create the process by which the pleasure of God becomes realized. Now, if someone does not make an Adam Nene and he enjoys it, does he enjoy it? Yeah, you can't deny that he's enjoying it. But what he's done is he's been teased. He's enjoying it. How do we know he's been teased? Because the second bite is not the same. He's been teased. Harehu gozel et hakadosh baruch hu. He has robbed the Creator from what? From what? From the pleasure that he had intended, and you rob him of a pleasure. You know how many times someone wants to tell a joke, right? And one person in the crowd heard the joke, and just before he's giving the punchline, he says, "Oh, and this is the end of the joke," and you rob the pleasure. We use that expression. Take away the pleasure of the person. What we do here is the same idea. We take away the pleasure of God, because our twisted minds, when I say twisted, only because from the observance of things around us, we come to the realization that God really doesn't shed so much beneficence upon us. Holocausts, inquisitions, illness, business failures, you name them. There's a wide variety that can fit everyone's need. Almost like there's more of that to feel what we want. Is that what we want? Of course not. Everyone wants a wholesome life, a complete life, free of chaos. Can't happen. You know why it doesn't happen? Because we rob God of his pleasure. This is not the intent. While it appears to be in every household, with every human being, it appears to be as if God is playing games with us, and God is not providing us with the sustenance that we require. And then it's God's fault. And so can't he provide us with that sustenance? And the answer is no. No. Because that metaphysical, I'll use the word metaphysical, or eternal nature of the sustenance of God must undergo a process. Like wool. Wool, unfortunately, I say unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way. But unfortunately, wool must undergo a process before it becomes a piece of cloth. Why does it have to undergo the process? But we understand that. That means when it's in its natural environment, it cannot be used directly for the purposes of mankind. So too should we begin to understand that the beneficence of the light force of God cannot, by its nature, be absorbed into the community of mankind and to be used in its raw, naked character. Got to be converted. Got to undergo a process. You rob them of a pleasure. Diktiv gozel aviv ve'imo. Aviv. What does aviv mean? Zeu zerampin. Remember we said before, it must undergo the zerampin. Another packet of energy out there that was created so that we could have long life. It was created so that we have no business failure. It was created that we don't have problems in our family. Oh, this is waiting out there. But it hasn't been converted. Now here are these two entities called Zerampin. We have a code name for it. What's the difference? And in the Talmud Esrei, we know what the function of Zerampin is. Channeling. Might be referred to almost as the mochin, the channeling, like the brain. But the mind is closer to it. Because what is the mind? Now you can't say the brain is the brain. That's, that physical. You've seen brains sometimes in pictures. What's the mind? No, the mind is not that. The mind is more of a metaphysical nature. Zerampin is channeling. The brain, you might say, is Malchut. It is the vessel. What's the difference between the mind and the brain? Well, one is channeling thoughts, wherever it's coming from. read the books. It's so clear. It's no longer a mystery. It's still a mystery to the scientific establishment, but that's their problem. One day maybe they can even read a book from a rabbi and think that it might serve a purpose. And then you have Malchut, the vessel. The vessel. You have father and mother. Father channels the semen, contains whatever the sperm must contain, and what the mother does is create the evolutionary process. Create the evolution. So you need these two aspects. In Kabbalah, we have a word for it. We call it father and mother. The reason they call it father and mother, so that we can have a hint as to how the non-physical, I say only non-physical, I do not say metaphysical, the non-physical procedure operates. So the Kabbalist, Rabbi Shimon, has given us the vocabulary by which we can associate the process that we're referring to. Father and mother. Father, all of us understand father, by understanding the nature of the father, understanding the nature of the mother, understanding how these two together create a certain process, that something else evolves. A child evolves, a fetus evolves, and then a child, etc., and so on. The same process. The same process is the slight force of God. For it ultimately to become manifest, must undergo this process. And if it doesn't, then we're robbing our father or we're robbing our mother. Mother zuhi amalchut. Ki haneshamot ein toladot shel zer anpin umalchut. Because, as we understand, where did the fetus come from? From the mother and the father. The birth, a birth of something, must originate with mother and father. So too, this light force of God, forgetting about the birth of a child now, that we all understand must come from a father and a mother, unless you believe in Immaculate Conception, but normally speaking, it involves a father and a mother. So too, the beneficence, and there's more of that around. I mean, does that mean the only way you can have a manifestation of the light force of God is through a child? No, it's not the only way. We can manifest the light force of God in many, many other ways, including a cup of tea. This is the birth by virtue of that blessing. By virtue of that blessing, we make manifest. Because maybe in your minds, a thought of, does every child come out perfect? Some children are not so perfect. Not only physically, not only mentally, but down the road, they turn into characters of a nature that parents would prefer that they never had these children, right? Something went wrong in the process. You can blame God. This is the familiar attitude in religion. You see what religion has done? It's supposed to have brought a consciousness of the existence of God. You know what it's done? Just the opposite. Yeah, for someone who, there is no such thing as someone who has it well. I mean, sometime down the road, there'll be a complaint to God, whatever form it might take. So is this God's creation? No. No. It is our inability to prepare the setting, to prepare the environment, to prepare the landscape by which the light force of God reveals itself. See, in petroleum, we have nothing to do with it. That which we have nothing to do with, seems to run fairly well, but that's not true either. At the end, what happens? It comes to an end. You've got to go into the gas station and buy another gallon of gas. That bulb will not last eternally. It should. The petroleum should. And again, there may not even be need of petroleum. Alright? This is the process. And that is what is meant by the Zohar. Alright, I just want to touch on it. But I hope this will be a project that we will try to complete, because this process this process that is explained in such depth, and of course what is going to take a little longer is trying to relate these concepts into an understanding that we're familiar with. V'noda, the second paragraph here, v'noda shegadlut v'zivug zon einem rak be'et hatfilah. Okay? Want to know prayer is important? I can tell you my own experience. I couldn't wait for prayer to be over. Now, I'm almost sorry every time I come to the conclusion. I mean, all my former friends, in the morning, if you got an appointment, kind of a burden that is, to have to spend time praying in the morning. You woke up late, go on and on. Says Rabbi Ashlag, gleaning this from the Zohar, that the growth and the word is zivuk, which means intercourse, but it also means the connection, which once we have these two entities, like male and female, when does this process, or when can this process take place? Only at the time of prayer, when a blessing is recited, etc. Other than that, all other processes that exist in the world does not create the setting for the manifestation of the life force of God. We should pray all day. Then you wouldn't probably have to go to work. Well, then again, of course, you couldn't go to work if you're praying all day, but you wouldn't have to. You wouldn't have to. You would be constantly, be creating a setting and manifestation of the life force of God. See, there's a constant energy flow, a constant intercourse going on between Zerampin and Malchut. Constantly. Between mother and father. They're constantly generating energy. However, if mankind is not praying, when I say praying again, in the sense that we understand what prayer is, according to the Zohar, with kavanot, knowing what you're saying, not merely reciting the words. Unfortunately, that is not prayer, says the Zohar. As I mentioned in Miracles, Mysteries, and Prayer. Prayer without kavanah is not a prayer. That means you could be spending all day in the Bet HaKnesset if it is without kavanot. Without kavanot. To the extent that there's an organization, an international organization, that takes care of the proper writing of tefillin and mezuzot. If anybody wants tefillin or mezuzot with kavanot, then they know there's only one address in the world. That's our center. But if you don't want kavanot, then you go buy it elsewhere. Without kavanot, the Zohar made it. Now, does that mean we have to agree with the Zohar? No, you can disagree with the Zohar. But according to the Zohar, without kavanot, it was a procedure, an exercise that did not produce the desired result. So the only time, says Rabbi Ashlag, that this circuit of energy, and it's continuous, father and mother, meaning Zeram, Pinu, Malchut, are always there to generate this energy for us, but not at the time of prayer. Zivugim nifsak, their intercourse, because only through intercourse, according to the Jewish religion, other religions said you don't need intercourse. That's why I guess the priests don't have to get married. They're having children maybe anyway. So, Without zivug, there is no development, no manifestation of life. So too, says Rabbi Ashlag, if it is not during the time of prayer, zivugim nifsak, that circuitry of energy is not taking place. V'chozrim lekatnut l'pchinat vak, and they return to a small state, meaning a state by which it, in English we might refer to it as an animated, suspended state of consciousness. Ulefichach anu tzrichim b'kol bracha, and therefore every time we need, and it is required in each blessing, lahamshir gadlut l'zorah and pin bechadash. You must be conscious. You must be conscious. Are you conscious that when you walk into this Bet HaKnesset and it's dark, what's the first reaction? Look for the switch. Second nature. So too, and this is a requirement, so too must it be second nature that before you come to make the blessing, your consciousness flips the switch. And that creates a circuitry of energy, begins to move. Umakom hamshacha hu me'aba ve'ima ilayim. Ki heim tamid b'bchina gadlut upanim b'panim. V'zivukim einen nifsak la'olam. Now, in this world, we understand that there are times of circuitry, and there are times when there is no circuitry. If I flip the switch to the off position, is there a circuitry of energy in this room? No, finished. When I flip the switch to the opposition, I create a circuitry. Now, everything pertaining to this world operates the same way. Is there constantly a circuitry of energy? Well, we have magnetic fields and so on. But those magnetic fields that we experience, circuitry of energy, you feel energy in the air, is only because the 36 tzaddikim somewhere in the world are constantly in prayer. They're constantly creating this circuitry of energy. Is it enough for us? No, it's not enough. If there was sufficient manifestation of the energy of the light force of God, none of us would ever be sick. None of us would have business failures. None of us would have any other forms of chaos. It just wouldn't exist. But the problem is that in our world, these two worlds, known as Zeir Anpin and Malkut, become disconnected. However, there is now another world of existence referred to as Abba Ve'ima, father and mother. This can become a little confusing, but it's an upper level sufficient to understand that, where if that level ceased to exist, this world could not exist. Nothing would be able to exist. There would be no energy in the world. There is a constant flow of circuitry. Constant flow of circuitry. Uzivugim einen nifsak lo'olam. And it never ceases. Ki heim einam tzrichim lo'redet hamalchut mibina shalahem liot besot ki chafetz chesed. There are needs. We all have needs. Even the need to share is a need. You have family, you have a father and a mother. There's a need to share. A need to make manifest this internal aspect of the light force of God. There is another concept in this world. Not the need to share, but the desire to share. Meaning, if the need cannot become manifest, then what happens? Someone doesn't have a father and mother. Is there a desire? There won't be a desire, because a desire is only with a father and a mother. Even though one may not feel the necessity, the need to honor his father and mother. If there's no father and mother, what would happen? The need would go away. There wouldn't be any thought consciousness of sharing with a father and a mother, because it doesn't exist. On another level, there's no need, yet there could exist desire. With that.